I'm asking this, but again, best costuming, it would definitely go away. Only Michael could have delivered that quite with that authority and with that truthfulness. So today we hear one of Jesus' more famous teachings, right? You know, there are people that are outside of the church that could probably tell you that Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor. Blessed are the hungry." And these blessings, these strange blessings, show up in both Matthew and Luke's Gospels, and they are known as the Beatitudes. And one way that we can read and study the Bible is when we notice that a story is told in two places, right? We can look at both of them and consider the differences between the words and details to find out what Jesus might be trying to emphasize to us, what Jesus might be trying to teach us today. So I want to dive into Jesus' sermon on the plain. Jesus' sermon on the plain. Not like snakes on a plane, like sermon on like a flat level place, all right? And Matthew's account is known as the Sermon on the Mount, right? And just in the subtle shift of geography indicates a shift in Luke's Gospel's particular focus on and attention on the poor, on the hungry, and on the other disadvantaged folks. By where Jesus stands, Jesus commits himself to leveling our world socially and economically. That's one of the points, is that Jesus is not up here above everybody else. Jesus is with the people. And this is the part that challenges and stretches me personally. And I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to see if Jesus challenges and stretches any of you as well. Jesus' list of blessings in Luke is also much shorter than Matthew's, because Luke takes away any attempt to spiritualize these teachings. All right? In Matthew's version, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." What does Jesus say in Luke? Blessed are the poor. People who are literally impoverished. Not poor when compared to Bill Gates. Not people who feel poor today. The poor. Period. Again, Jesus teaches in Matthew, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." In Luke, what does it say? Blessed are those who hunger now. It is not missed a meal hungry, right? We've all been there. This is literal grinding stomach, wakes you up in the middle of the night because there is no food in your house. And it continues. Blessed are you who weep. Then blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, when they revile you, and they defame you on account of the Son of the Man. Anybody else getting nervous with me? Jesus, in Luke's Gospel, has a laser focus on care for, help, and good news to those who are suffering socially and economically. This theme is continued and emphasized in Luke's sequel, you might have read it, the book of Acts. In Acts, the disciples and the early church carry on Christ's concern for the poor, the hungry, the grieving, the oppressed. And if this wasn't explicit enough, right? If we had any doubts, well, maybe Jesus really doesn't mean it. He adds even a sharper edge to these teachings by giving us a corresponding list of woes and curses. All right? In fact, the Greek word that Jesus uses, woe, is a bit of an earthly expletive. I'll leave the exact translation up to you all this morning in your own minds. But woe to you who are rich. Woe to you who are full now. Woe to you who are laughing now. Woe to you when all speak well of you. And just in case we are tempted to dodge the full impact by imagining them addressed to a crowd of people in a nation from a long time ago, Jesus reaches across time and space with a ringing you. All my grammar Nazis out there, you. And it should be y'all. It's the you plural. You in both blessings and woes. You, Jim Engel. You, St. Peter's Lutheran Church. You, the United States of America. Jesus is talking to us today, and this might be the point where we start to wonder where the good news is, right? We might be wondering where the gospel is for those of us this morning who have a roof over our heads, who have cupboards and freezers with food, who are not persecuted and kicked out of our community or our family for our religious beliefs. Perhaps whether we hear the good news this morning depends on where and with whom we stand. This morning on the plain, on this great level area, Jesus Christ declares his care, his compassion, and his commitment for all people who are suffering. Yes, Jesus came to die on the cross and rise from the grave to free all of us from the power of sin and death. And yet his words and actions during his ministry, feeding the poor, healing the sick, welcoming the outcast, indicate that he has come to combat all the forces of death that we face now and we face at the end of our lives. Yes, eternal salvation is important and priceless. And Jesus also mandates that his disciples, his church, me and you, we work to care for those in need right now, right here. Now, some of us may currently fall into the groups that Jesus declares blessed, right? There might be some of us in this room that are in the midst of financial desperation. There might be people in here who are lacking healthy food. There might be people in here who cannot afford crucial medication. You may be suffering and sick. You may be ostracized and discriminated against. God's message to you this morning is hang in there, and that you are not alone. God cares deeply for and about you. Come talk to me. We don't have a lot of money in this church, but one of the things that we can do is we know people, and we can try and get you connected with agencies and resources to help lift you out of that soul-crushing despair. Others of us this morning might find ourselves not in any of the criteria of the people that Jesus proclaims blessed. Does that automatically land us in the woe and curses category? Not necessarily. Again, I wonder if it depends on where and with whom we stand. If we are not currently one of the blessed groups, right? Perhaps we are called to be with those folks who are suffering poverty, who are suffering hunger, who are suffering rejection. So that when blessings are bestowed on these desperate folks, we too hear it as good news, because we hear that our friends are getting good news, that our brothers and sisters are getting help and hope. We hear that those we love are loved by God and deserve help and healing rather than scorn and shame. This is why it is important, maybe even crucial to our faith, that we not only offer high-quality worship services and Bible study programs here in church, but also that we go, that we are sent, that we give and serve and in ways that connect us financially and socially to people who are looked down on or are abused in our communities, in our country, and in our world. Your gifts last year, we sent in gifts to the ELCA World Hunger Appeal, and altogether we were able to fund 347 projects in our country and around the world that address food insecurity. You've affected 47 states and 62 countries. Today, we are raising money to send our high school youth group and some middle schools as well to engage in direct service to people who are very different from us and in need in Washington, D.C. It's teaching our youth at a young age about how our faith compels and connects us to those who are suffering. I love that the Wells program that you sponsor, our outdoor leadership program for 7th and 8th graders, I love the fact that we made the conscious choice to base it out of the East End United Community Center. Even though we provide the bulk of the resources and the volunteers, we decided to be housed in the East End because the kids in most desperate need often don't have cars and wouldn't be able to get to this church. So we put it in a place where they could walk. Part of being church, part of being Christian, is going down to a level place where all are welcome, where all are wanted, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of immigration status, regardless of political party, regardless of our age, our wealth, or our sexual orientation. And all of us who have stood in solidarity with the impoverished, the hungry, and the outcast know that it is not always easy nor pleasant. Sometimes those we are trying to help do things and say things and make choices that we don't approve of, right? How many people have been there? I wonder if it might be more helpful to stand in awe of the burdens that poor people often carry rather than standing in judgment in how they carry those burdens. I want to end with a story. The last church I served at out in Washington State was very generous to the community around, had a lot of volunteers, gave a lot of money away, and did a lot of really good things. This is a small snapshot of a small group of folks, so just that disclaimer. Due to gang and drug activity in our area, I could hear gunfire from my house every night. They started an after-school program because what they found is that most of the gang issues and drug issues actually took place when school ended till about 5:30. What is that space? Before parents get home, right? So we created a safe space where kids from the elementary school and the middle school could come and be. And it was amazing. Kids got a healthy snack and then help with math and reading from caring adults. It was a really cool program. There was, however, a slight issue, and it might not be where you would think. It was when 3 of the kids started showing up at church. That's a great thing, right? It was a middle school boy and his 2 elementary-age sisters, and they started coming to worship. And most of the congregation was thrilled. And yet some weren't so happy. These kids had never been to church before. What do you do when you go someplace that you've never been before? Do you know how to act? Do you know what's normal? The middle sister had a problem with stealing. I don't know what her issue was, but she loved the hand sanitizer and would walk out with 1 or 2 of them every week. And I got complaints about it. I mean, and I understood, but it was a long story. The youngest had a horrible crime of getting up on a regular basis and going to the bathroom too often during worship. They made noise. They talked to me in the middle of communion. Pretty soon, a few of the people who didn't like the kids' behavior came to me to complain. And I don't lose my temper often. And I think I managed to keep my cool that day, I hope. As I explained how those kids, those disruptive kids, those disrespectful kids walked 2.5 miles on their own without their parents each week to get to Sunday school. Each week to get to church. They came through snow, they came through rain, they came through cold, and one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in our town because they had dared to believe us when we told them that all were welcome in our church. I believe my final words to that small, unhappy minority was that we were blessed to have those kids here. Last I heard, Central Lutheran Church in Yakima, Washington was celebrating the oldest brother's graduation from high school. And they had granted him a scholarship to help him get through college because they had stood and continue to stand with those Christ called blessed. Thanks be to God, and amen.